Hi, Wayfinders. This is Sarah-Nell Walsh, and I am here with Whitney. You know what is really fun is that my work wife, from when I was a partner at Baker, Taylor, went to college with Whitney and is who introduced us. And so this is kind of like Old Home Week because Whitney and I have been orbiting each other's circles now for about the past decade. And this is the first time we've gotten to really interact professionally. So this is fun.
Yes, so fun. We both have, our work wife or my life wife. Yeah, we have a mutual love friend. And so it's awesome when people come together in circles and interact.
I know. She's my favorite. We were just actually discussing before we came on how much we are missing her. So Jody, if you're watching, know that you are being very loved during this conversation. I know that I start every single one of these by talking about how everyone's experiencing this differently, how some people are having a really, really hard time. And it is just hard from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to bed. And that's okay. That is totally valid. And I get a lot of my clients are having that experience, and I get that. Other people, like my husband, are living their best life. They're experiencing work from home for the first time, and they are really enjoying this added flexibility. Even if they're working just as much, they're able to work a little differently, and they're really joyful. And they're also, that is fine. So how are you experiencing this quarantine, Whitney?
Yes, and all of the above. It depends on the day or the hour, right? Yeah. I mean, I think we're in it day by day. I would say more highs than lows as we get at least a little bit more comfortable with our discomfort, probably. But yeah, doing okay.
So what has been hardest for you in this transition?
I would say accepting my own limitations that I'm faced with on a daily basis. This is not a unique answer, but I'm a mom also, in addition to a business owner. So a mom of a 7, 4, and 2-year-old. And so I already knew I didn't have, the most patience out there. And so being faced, with the multiple roles and responsibilities, from teaching to just parenting to managing a team, managing clients all at the same time, requires more patience than I was born with or ever care to acquire. So limitations, and just realizing I'm human and I can't do it all well today, but I'm going to do the best I can do in these areas, and just forgiving myself on the others.
Yeah, I think it's really been an exercise in self-compassion for those of us who have really high standards for ourselves.
For sure.
I used to joke when I practiced law, when people would be like, how do you do it? I'd be like, I can be a really great mom for 2 hours a day.
That's right.
And loving and kind for 2 hours every day. And that's really part of me.
Yeah. I mean, one of my female partners early on, said to me, I think when I was expecting my first child, I was just like, you will not be an amazing employee, colleague, boss, wife, and mother at the same time. But rotationally, you can be all of those things. So one day you're going to be the best, colleague, boss ever, and you're not going to feel so great on the home front. And the next day you'll be mom of the year, and you're going to need a little grace at work, and that's okay. So I think we're all doing the best we can with what we're given in these circumstances.
Yeah. So for those of you who are new to Wayfinders, I'm Sarah-Nell Walsh, and I'm a professional coach, former practicing attorney, and the founder of Wayfinders. And I'm here with Whitney Ott, and I'm going to let her describe what her superpowers are in the work world.
Well, maybe I'll just start with what I do. So I'm a co-owner of Jackson Spalding, one of the owners there, and that is a full-service marketing communications agency. So we do everything from help our clients, who range from local and regional players to national and global clients. We help them establish their brands. We help them strategically go to market, in an integrated way, using all channels and communications and marketing, modes. And then we help protect reputations and brands in moments of crisis, which obviously, a lot of folks find themselves in today.
Great. So how are you helping clients right now?
Yeah, it's funny. There are certain clients who seem to not yet be as severely impacted, whereas the majority, right, like most folks watching, and certainly myself, and maybe you too, certainly are interacting with folks on a daily basis whose business has been from significantly impacted to, having delayed impact now. And I mean, I think what we're going to talk a lot about today is never has communication been more important, regardless of who your audience is. But certainly, I think one of the most important audiences for every organization, large or small, is its employees. There's a lot of research out there that right now employers are the most trusted source of information. So what a phenomenal opportunity we all have as leaders, and also a little bit of pressure, to get it right and to be there for our people.
Yeah, and I'm hearing clients of mine who are business owners feeling that pressure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to invite you guys, now that you know what we're going to hear about today, to go down into the lower right-hand corner and hit that share button, because I guarantee you that there are people in your network who need to hear this message. So go down and hit the share button. Even if you're not watching it live, you can still hit that, and you can either share it to your timeline, or even better, you can start a watch party, which is the last option, which will then show you who else in your network is watching, which is super fun. And you guys can sideline conversation as me and Whitney chat further. So Whitney, what needs to look different about communications when you're managing remotely?
I think thinking about it through the lens of your people, and in employee communications or internal communications, but this probably rings true for your client relationships as well. I think first and foremost, just more intentionality. You cannot replace human interaction. We're being forced to really creatively figure out how to keep that human interaction going in this digital, working from home world. And so I do think being extremely intentional, I've joked before with a lot of business owners that, and just leaders, you should give yourself a new title during this season, which is Chief Encouragement Officer, because I don't care who you are, or how successful you are, everybody needs encouragement and to know that they matter and they're not alone. And so I would just encourage saying, just being super intentional without reaching out to your people. And that can just be, on video, a phone call, a text, a handwritten note, et cetera. And then the other thing I would say is, because we are in this work from home situation, find some collaboration or collaborative platforms maybe that work for you. And I'll just offer two very specific ones. At Jackson Spalding, we obviously do a lot of facilitation for our clients and workshops, but then for our own team, being able to ideate together and brainstorm together. And so virtual whiteboards have been really helpful. So if folks haven't already used those, again, super tactical, but Miro and Mural are two that we found really successful and helpful. And then last but not least, in terms of what needs to look different, hopefully everyone's always innovating and creative, but I do think getting super creative with your communication, especially as you think about communicating internally with your people. And hopefully you're not the one having to do this. We've had some really organic examples. That's how you, I think, know that a culture is pretty healthy when you're not having to force it and be overly intentional, but you've got people with ideas. Let those go. We had some folks last week or a couple of weeks ago say at our agency, we should do a virtual talent show. And we're like, oh, wow, this could get interesting. And we did it. And there were incredible talents that you had any idea that existed. And some that you were like, bless their hearts, but they still showed up, and it gave everybody a good laugh, and everybody was super supportive. So I think there's a lot you can do. We'll talk about more ways to engage, if we've got time, but creativity is something.
Bubbles up, right?
Yeah.
And I would agree with you that really is a sign of a good culture when you have folks who aren't leaders, right? Taking a leadership role in formulating that culture. So one of the things that has come up with my clients during this time is they either are someone who receives work from someone else, or they are someone who delegates work, and seems to be a lot of opaqueness around bandwidth. So some people are staying home and they're watching Netflix 6 hours a day, and they literally have nothing to do. And other people are working 16 hours a day trying to get it done, and their managers are giving them like busy work, right? Because they don't have a sight line into all the different work that they're doing. Whereas normally if we're in the office, someone would see you with your head down working real hard, and they might not come in and try and give you busy work. But in this environment, I think that both leaders and team members are feeling like no one has a sight line into what people are doing. So can you give us some ideas around that, how to do that better?
Sure. I mean, it obviously goes without saying, but I do think it's super important for teams, regardless of size. You don't need to break them into multiple teams, however you're structured, to have at a minimum weekly, if not bi-weekly, meetings, right? Just team meetings. And I think a couple of things that are pretty basic, but have been really helpful for our clients and then certain teams at our agency as well. One is just to ask a really great question. It's like, what are your big rocks for the week? Like really quickly go around, what are your big rocks for the week? So as a leader, if somebody says something that you're like, why are they spending their time on that? What? Or if they don't have a rock, you can help them reprioritize in a way that aligns with the priorities of the business today. And that might be very different than what their normal work stream was. But I will say as a side note, as leaders, I do think we have a massive responsibility to clearly communicate and repeat what those priorities are. And if they have stayed the same, and most people's roles and contributions should look the same, or if, you had to roll up your sleeves and change the game a little bit because of this new season, because of coronavirus and the impact on the business, and maybe putting people into different roles. I think it is your job to establish kind of the North Star and what those priorities are, and then help your people understand how do they ladder up to that. And so I think just asking, what's your big rock? We've seen that, and it's a not kind of aggressive way to let people almost self-identify. They're like, I don't really know what my one is. Or if they list 15, you're like, you need to help prioritize. Another way is just on the bandwidth side of things, the red, yellow, green system. I don't know if you or your clients ever do that, but it's another really quick way to go around a team. Red, I'm drowning, I'm slammed. In fact, I'm like beyond red if somebody's got help to take something, versus the folks who are like, you know what, I'm green, let me take it on. I've got tons of bandwidth, and somewhere in between. So those are just a couple of really easy hacks that I think help with communication. And then I would just add, one-on-ones, so extremely important, right? I already mentioned the intentionality, and not only checking in with people to genuinely build relationship and personally see how they're doing, but I think that's where you can privately kind of coach them a little bit and help them understand that they need to shift their priorities, or that you're feeling like they're distant, what's going on, and dig in there on an individual basis.
I think there are a lot of anxieties right now, and I think that is contributing to some of the not great communication internally. I think one thing that I'm seeing with my clients is that they are getting invited kind of spaghetti against the wall to all sorts of meetings, because people aren't taking the time to really think about who needs to be at various meetings, because everything feels so scary and so rushed that they're kind of like, I don't know who needs to be there, so I'm gonna invite everyone, right? And so maybe some of these meetings where you could go around the horn and do that are right now a little too big and kind of chaotic. What I've recommended in those situations are that people really start asking, what value do you expect me to add to this meeting? If it's a meeting they don't think they should be at, to really try and refocus those meetings as to who should be there and who shouldn't.
And sorry, Sally, I was going to say to that, facilitation perspective that we do up front. I mean, you would be shocked, at least for us, how many clients do not practice this, or just leaders. Not only if you're inviting me to the meeting, put in the invite what the purpose is of it, and proactively if there's any pre-work and what you hope to get out of it. So clear purpose and clear takeaway from that meeting, so the person knows how they're going to contribute. And if that is not clear, especially to your point, I'm not sure what I have to add, or could I just send in my thoughts in advance because I'm focusing XYZ, I think that is really helpful.
And then I think also some people are really scared to say that they're red and overloaded right now, or that they're green and can take work, because there's all this job insecurity. And so how would you recommend that managers address anxiety and its effects right now on employee engagement?
Yeah. So hard, right? I mean, I think first and foremost, acknowledging that, who isn't anxious? I think uncertainty, regardless of if you got the kids at home or if you're, alone, regardless, they're just not being able to control and not understanding what tomorrow, next week, the next week, summer, et cetera, will look like. I think unnerves all of us. And so, it probably depends on the level of leadership. If you're a person at your organization who is in charge of who stays, who goes, tough decisions, that kind of thing, you've got a certain purview and a responsibility. I think if you are kind of a manager level and those are not your calls, and you're trying to make a team feel better about a situation and contribute, but I think you've got a job both to manage up to your leaders around the anxiety. But I mean, I would just say at Jackson Spalding, we kind of had this mantra, if you will, during this time from a communication perspective, that we wanted everything that we talked about or we, emailed, et cetera, to be compassionate, to be confident, to show that we were confident, and also to be clear. And so I do think, just to touch on those things, from a confidence perspective, if tough decisions are having to be made, or if you've shifted, your approach to business or what those priorities are, like I talked about, I think having confidence in that approach when you communicate is great, but compassion, so important, and probably the leading of those three. When you talk to your people, that of course they're anxious, encouraging them, and hopefully you got to walk the walk on this, but for us, and we have so many amazing clients who are doing this too, just flexibility out the wazoo. Like we have to maintain, as leaders of this organization, continuity of business, obviously, right? And everybody can agree with that regardless of their anxiety levels. But to the individual employee, how you get your work done, when you get that work done, where you get that work done, is going to look very different, and we're completely okay with that. How can I work with you individually? I think if you're a manager or, top dog, being extremely flexible and helping your people understand how to contribute in ways that still get the job done, but allow tremendous flexibility. And then clarity, it goes back to what I said about those priorities. I think people need to understand the priority. And I think as a leader, gosh, being flexible and being understanding right now that you don't want to burn out your people. They are extremely anxious. That said, you have to get the work done. So how can you get creative and bring in the people who are green, and have the bandwidth to help the people who are red so that they can show up their best selves tomorrow?
Right. And I think, what I've heard from some of my clients is the people who are red won't say they're red because they're hoarding work. They don't they want to be, they want to have, especially with lawyer clients, they want to have these great hours. They want to show how valuable they are to the organization. And the people who are green are scared to raise their hand and say they're green because they don't want to be like, well, then I'm saying I'll be the first to go, right? So when they're asking for bandwidth, they're getting kind of all this confusing intel back from them.
Well, and that's where, I know every business is unique, but it really stems from leadership, I think at the top, to have these one-on-one conversations with the people who are red, and to say, I've had these conversations with clients and, folks in our own agency to say, let me help you redefine your goals for the short term. I want to see your, billable go down a percentage to allow these people on your team to go up. How can we share the wealth? Something very specific to that nature, or in a non-billable environment, just saying, I want to see you evolve as a leader. And that means you not doing and you helping lead this team so that they can all contribute in a valuable way. So I do think there's a lot of leadership learnings and lessons in that.
I really love that, like, concrete advice and giving people that language so that they can go and have these really courageous conversations. So you talked a little bit about compassion and how that is so important. Before we got on the call, we were talking, or at the top of the call, we were talking about how important self-compassion is right now. But how do you keep high expectations for your employees and hold them accountable while also giving them great compassion?
Yeah, such a great question. Some of my friends, I've been joking at our agency. I feel like I've been on a caring candor campaign is what I've called it for the last year and a half or 2 years. And it's frankly, philosophically, if you'll just let me geek out for a minute, it's this idea of reframing, why do people think there's accountability and then there's compassion, and these two worlds need to be blended? I'm like, we have to reframe it that if you truly care about someone's growth, especially somebody you want to invest in long-term, that you want to be a leader at your organization, then setting clear expectations, helping them, achieve or remove barriers, and then letting them know when they miss the mark and how constructively they could do better next time is care. It is caring. They're one and the same to me. Now, of course, you can't be a jerk in your approach, right? I guess, unfortunately, there's probably been too many examples of that, in years past, but I think those two things are merged. And so I think it starts with the mindset of giving real-time feedback, not waiting for something to fester, and reframing it as, I'm going to give this person the chance to do something better that I have trust and faith in them. I believe they can do it. So I'm going to caringly tell them, hey, I think this is an opportunity, and then invite that feedback. There was a TED Talk, I wish I could remember who it was, that we shared with our mentors over the last few years about creating a culture of not just giving feedback, but being open to receiving it. And that's something individually people can do. And we found really powerful, just ask one question, which is at the end, at all levels of leadership. So I would say the higher up you are, the more important this question is. At the end of something, especially if you've worked with a colleague that you don't get to every, routinely, is to say, what's one thing I could do better? You don't have to answer it right now, but I genuinely value your feedback and would love to know. I mean, my gosh, doing that as an executive, asking your intern if you worked with them on a project, I think it just, again, sets that culture of constant growth mindset. We all can improve, and we have a responsibility to each other because we care so much about each other, to give real-time feedback. And then, I go on and on, but ironically, I'm reading right now, Radical Candor.
I love that book. That was so good to see you. Oh, I love
Kim Scott. Yeah.
So many clients.
Perfect. I was going to say, you can't like have this conversation without, mentioning that book. So it's a great read for any leader out there. And I think, what she would say, I think, doesn't go away during a pandemic even, right? Which is like, you're not doing anybody a favor, especially the individual, by giving fake praise or tolerating mediocrity. You have a responsibility to help advance them. And so that idea of caring personally, but then also like, challenging directly, I think is her kind of two-pronged approach, is so relevant to this conversation. But it, all does start back to relationship and genuinely caring about your people. There's no shortcut to that.
And I think that what's hard is if you didn't build that foundation before now, it's hard to convey the compassion now when you're giving the feedback, right?
Sure.
Because I think that, one of the things I got backward when I first started leading is that I started giving feedback before I developed the relationship.
Yeah.
There wasn't trust there. And then I read Radical Candor and I was like, oh, I did this backwards. I need to build the relationship and then start giving the feedback.
Right.
Know that it's coming from a caring place and that I really want to develop them as a person and that I want to see them be successful.
Yeah.
And so if you were not laying that foundation prior to COVID, you need to really start doing it now.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would say. It can be daunting if you're like, oh, shoot, I've got some hard feedback to give today, and I really don't have a strong relationship with this person. But I would say it's never too late to start. And, a really interesting exercise might be after this call to just even jot down the people that right now you either think are not doing what they should be doing, or you just got some critical feedback that you feel like you need to give. And then kind of rate yourself, maybe high, medium, low, and how strong is your relationship with that person. And I'm not saying hold the feedback, but I do think you could be really intentional over the next week, month, to what are like 3 touch points with that person that you could do that are genuine and meaningful to get to know them better, to get to know them, what they're struggling with, and support them. Send them an article that you think is relevant, I don't know.
Another great resource for folks is a book called Thanks for the Feedback. And you might be thinking about that TED Talk. It's written by some HBR folks. And what they were asked to do is they were asked to write a book about giving feedback and about how to best give feedback. And basically what the book turned into was a masterclass in how to receive feedback. And the premise of the book is that all feedback is generous, and the problem with feedback always lies with the receiver and almost never with the giver. And it was super cringy to read this book because it talks about all the ways humans avoid feedback. And as you're on each chapter, you're like, I do that. I did that this morning with my husband. Like, really, because you're getting feedback from everyone all the time.
Right. Well, and that's what I love about the question. This does sound familiar, so I think it probably is that. The question is like, what's one thing? And you can even say, I didn't say 10. Like I want one piece of meaningful feedback that you could give me. So it's not overwhelming, and it's something you can handle regardless of probably your skill at receiving.
Right. And I've actually said to people, and they've said, would you like some feedback? I'd be like, I'm not ready for it right now.
Yeah.
I would love it maybe in an email tomorrow. Like, right. This conversation has been hard enough. Like I want it, but I don't want it right now.
Right. Go ahead and put it in the mail to me.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, and people who are in my coaching program have heard me say that. Like, they've heard me be like, no, like I've taken it enough. Like I cannot take it anymore right now.
Sure.
And also knowing what your limits are and being really honest about them, I think is really important.
Right.
So as we're winding down here, what questions should leaders be asking themselves and reflecting on as it relates to their culture? Because really what we're talking about, all about this internal communications, is how you're creating your company culture, right?
Right.
And so what should leaders be thinking about now to kind of start the thought ideation before we all show up back in the office with whatever reofficing looks like?
Sure. It is a great question. And I think one of the great questions that could be asked around this is what's your internal communications compass? Meaning, like, what's guiding you ultimately as an organization? And so that really gets to your own brand foundation. We help companies with that a lot of the time, either refresh it or it's interesting during a crisis, right? Especially like a pandemic. You start to see if that foundation, your own foundation, is a little shaky. If you're like, I don't know what my guiding light is. I don't know what my North Star is in terms of a mission, your values, the guiding principles that you want your employees to live by, that you live by. And so I think shoring that up and making sure that there is a foundation, there is a North Star, that everything can kind of line, because really internal communications at any point, especially when the going gets tough, should be a reflection of that or an extension of that. It makes it a lot easier if you know. And so, like, from a values perspective at Jackson Spalding, we've got 8 core values, and one is we tell the truth. Another is we work together as a team. Another is we have fun. And so those things have come very handy. Whether we're writing, we can reference that, to kind of steer the message that's about to come. And certainly just kind of guide us on a daily basis about our priorities. I think another question that's a little bit more pragmatic or practical is, what's next? What are my people going to need? And so certainly over the last couple of weeks, as reemergence has become, the topic du jour. And I think, to your point, some businesses are considering or already putting plans together of like back to work, in phases. What does that look like? How do we keep our people safe? How do we communicate? And so we do a lot of crisis communications work at Jackson Spalding. And part of that, not only like helping people respond to an immediate crisis, but also doing some crisis planning to help them kind of shore up internal resources to make sure they're in best shape as possible should XYZ crisis occur. Part of that is scenario planning. And so that's been really helpful for us to just put on your employee hat right now and think about emergence from the eyes of your employee, and literally and physically, what does coming back to the office look like? For some of your employees, that's going to be public transportation. For some, it's going to be driving their cars and parking in the parking deck, and then walking to an elevator and pushing a button and coming up, and then going to the coffee machine, or the water refill, the bathrooms, everything about it, conference rooms. And so just thinking about that helps you anticipate all of the needs that will come. I think the mindset. And part of that scenario planning for us at Jackson Spalding, we're doing an employee survey right now, not to lead our timing by any means. We're taking obviously advice from, the CDC and health officials, et cetera. But we are asking ourselves this question of, while culture is so tremendously important to us and being together, we love it. We think it, sparks creativity, et cetera. Our team has done an amazing job, as most have, being resilient in this environment. And I just think to understand holistically and collectively, is it like 90% of people are like, please, let's get back as soon as possible? Or 90% of people like, ain't no way I want to come back, And so we might open our office, but what is the expectation for our people, and remaining very flexible there? I think listening can be really important, I guess.
So if folks need more support on these topics or want to talk through some strategies with you, how do they best get in touch with you? And I think we have a slide to share here.
Yes, let me attempt to pull this up.
And just so you'll know, I'm going to drop her contact information as well in the comments box at the bottom.
Thank you. Are you seeing that okay,
Sarah? I am. Perfect.
Okay, yeah. So there's my email address. I would be happy for anybody to reach out to me. And if I'm not the right person, it might be an HR related question. I'm sure our head of HR would be happy to help you guys. And then there's our website there, /ThinkStand. And that's where we post a lot of content. We did a webinar on internal communications. It's, recorded and posted there. And just a tease, we have an upcoming webinar. I don't think it's posted yet, but on the 28th of May, I'm really excited about this. This is to help more about marketers and communicators. So if you are interested in communication, and we're featuring folks from global companies or some of our partners in Asia to help us anticipate what's to come and how we can really up our communications game, knowing that they're about a month ahead of us in reemergence and all of that. So
that's exciting.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Sarah-Nell. I really, really appreciate it. And obviously could talk a lot about this topic. It's near and dear to my heart.
So fun. And I'm so glad that you agreed. I actually saw her webinar topic and was like, oh my gosh, I've been fielding so many questions about exactly this. I need to get Whitney on here. So that's how that came through. So definitely sign up for Jackson Spalding's webinars. They are providing some really top-notch content that is very relevant and also very actionable, like right now. So Whitney, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the Facebook Live.